And now our host, Stephen Lee Morris.
This week we're joined by Margaret Gray. Margaret is a graduate of the dramaturgy program of the Yale School of Drama. She has been an LA Times theater critic since 2008, and she has been the president of the Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle and currently continues to serve on that circle. Margaret Gray, welcome to Animal Farm.
Thank you. I feel like an animal.
There are plenty out there, So you're in good company. When did you start at the LA Times, and then how did you get there as a theater critic?
Okay, I think it was around 2009, and I had gone to drama school at Yale with Charlie McNulty, and then we'd sort of fallen out of touch, but we both ended up in LA. He was the chief theater critic for the LA Times at that time, still is, but it was newer then. And then I was a stay-at-home mom, and we got in touch again through Facebook, which I know has been, maligned in recent years for its role in various horrible scandals, but it was helpful to me back then because I got to be in touch with Charlie again, who'd been my best friend, and he kept encouraging me to write, and I kept thinking, well, who am I to judge other people's criticism? And I'd been out of the field for kind of a long time. So it was a bit of a steep learning curve. Anybody who's seen LA theater for a couple years pretty much knows the major players.
So you were both in the dramaturgy program at Yale, yeah. Is that correct? Okay.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
He was just 2 years ahead of me, I think, but we overlapped, and then he was teaching there for the next few years. So I saw a lot of him. And then I think I moved to LA before he did, and I got married out here and started bearing children like it was going out of style.
How many children do you have?
Well, I have 3. I guess it's not that many, but it seemed like a lot at the time. Yeah, they were tightly spaced and they were all over the place and they were very cute. So that was all I really cared about for a really long, still kind of is, but it's the most important thing. But he urged me to get back. I mean, I had always wanted to be a writer. I had written some books before that. I had hoped to become a successful novelist. I had become an unsuccessful novelist at the time. So I wasn't sure I could, I could do it. I wasn't sure I could come up with an opinion about a play and write it down in 300 words or whatever, but I gave it a try, and it really is. I mean, it's something you have to practice, I think. So after doing it a while, I don't know if I ever really got it down to a science. I think I would approach each play as its own experience, and each review as a whole new obstacle to overcome. But
you were part, in addition to doing interviews, you were a regular contributor in a weekly column, as I recall.
Yeah, that's right. It was I think they called it the 9th Stage Beat or something, Stage Beat, wasn't it Stage Beat? And so, I would think it was on Fridays, and there would be like 4 little columns, and there were a regular crew of people. Like there was Philip Brandis, who I think you had on the show a few years ago, and Kathy Foley is another regular contributor, and there was somebody else, Charlotte Stout, who later went on to become a writer for TV. So, and so they kind of would work me in once in a while, but it was kind of competitive, to get the assignments and to get, and to me, it was all brand new because I would be driving my huge minivan, like to some theater. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know where I was going to park, and people who had been in the scene longer knew exactly where everything was, and they knew where they'd seen all the actors. But I was definitely coming into it, as a complete outsider to LA theater and, LA actors and LA directors. And there really is a community, I came to find out along the way. There's a tightly knit community of people who all know each other and work together. And wherever you go, in this huge sprawling metropolis, whatever theater you're at, you're probably going to see someone that you've seen before or worked, you know, so I was completely new to it. And I didn't realize the, you know, how enmeshed it all was. And I think at one time I referred to somebody by the wrong first name, just sort of casually. And I really got chewed out. They were like, you don't know this woman is the most important director in LA and you called her the wrong name or something. And so, it took a while. It took a while but I loved it because when I would go to the theater, there was nobody sitting on my lap, you know, nobody who had to be taken to the bathroom or needed a snack. I was like, I'm so excited to be out of the house and to be on my own. And the first couple of reviews I wrote were so glowing. They were so, I was
you were just so happy not to be home with the kids.
Best thing I've ever experienced. And so I had to kind of, it was hard to find the right tone. Like I had a lot of exclamation points in there. And so
how did that evolve and how did your approach to the work evolve, given that you had ambitions of being a novelist at that time or earlier? I'm wondering if you have an approach to theater criticism that you could live with in good conscience, knowing how tight the community is.
That's a really good question. I feel like I'm still trying things out. I feel like I want to be supportive of the community, which I think, you know, you might think that it's in conflict with giving honest criticism. I don't think it is. I think that, you know, people worry that if they see the actors too often or develop an affection for them, they won't be objective. I don't think that's true though, because I think, you know, the more you see people, the more you kind of realize what they're capable of. And I do kind of feel like I have almost a maternal affection for the actors. And I think that, you know, if sometimes I'm not pleased with what they did, but I still love them, you know, like you'd feel about a child. So it's all sounding a little bit weird at this point, but but I think what I'm saying is that I think you can kind of really like root for people and still be objective about what they're doing. I think. And my part of that was being part of the drama critics circle, which I didn't join until like 2012 or maybe even later. I started, and all the critics in the circle have been doing it, at least when I started, had been doing it for years. So they knew everybody's work and and what everybody, you know, had it been involved in. And you'd hear all these anecdotes like, oh, back in the day, you know, there was this one theater on Pico and now it's a hot dog. But there was a lot of anecdotes and they knew everybody. And they really were so excited to give them awards. And I remember the first award show I went to, I was like, who's going to want one of these? I was I was like, why would you want this? It was like this little plaque and it was from Us, so these kind of like grouchy people who criticize others for a living for a small amount of money or nothing. Like, these people who just volunteer to tell other people what they're doing wrong. It's like and it was, I think it was at the Colony Theater, you know, so it was like a small, and I remember the people who got the awards were like sobbing with emotion. They were so thrilled. And I remember it was like, that was such a revelation to me, because I thought these people are working so hard and they're doing all this work and they're pouring themselves into these roles and nobody is looking, you know, just to feel seen is so valuable, you know. And I feel that myself, as when I wrote my novel, there were no reviews of it. And then finally one came out in Publishers Weekly or something, and I had somebody send it to me and I was so excited it was negative. You know, so I definitely have been in that position of getting, you know, pouring myself and waiting for someone to say you're okay or you're not okay, but getting, you know, not the most, it wasn't what I wanted to hear, basically.
Yes.
And, I know that, you know.
Okay, here's a question then on that novel. Were they right? Were they wrong? Or was it a little of both?
That's a good question. I feel like on some level they were right. I mean, it wasn't, I think it said something. My novel was it was a young adult novel, sort of a fairy tale. And it was called The Ugly Princess and the Wise Fool. And it was kind of like just trying to parody the fairy tale tropes, kind of, in the young adult tropes. And I think the review said that it was a satire. It was sometimes amusing, but often thin. And I think in retrospect, that's probably true. I mean, it had started out as a little short story, and it probably wasn't the most profound work of fiction ever conceived, you know, but some people, I mean, I feel like maybe she missed, the reviewer maybe missed some of the humor. But then again, I didn't.
These are all the dynamics that go into play. Yeah. But they sometimes miss the point, and yet, damn them, they reveal something that's authentic and maybe annoying, but is actually helpful.
I mean,
it's
that's
just
true.
a mixed,
No,
and that's the role of having someone who's not your friend or family tell you about what you've created.
That's true.
So, and that art is really under siege, and that purpose is under siege. I guess so. I've heard some of the artists say, you just need 3 or 4 really good friends who will tell you when you've gone astray, who are really familiar with your work, what you're trying to do. And that's the antidote to saying we need critics. So I suppose, but it's very interesting. What about, you've done quite a few interviews for the LA Times, and
yes.
What was your first interview, and how did that go? And
well, I think I found that, you know, there's certain people who are really great at being interviewed, and they tend to be people who are very excited about getting what they're doing out into the world. They want the publicity, and they're super nice and helpful. And then there are other people who are very famous already, and they don't really care what you think of their, you know, they're just doing it, they're phoning it in. So I had a lot of problems with those types of people. Like, I would feel very disdained by them, and I would kind of, like, I have that story about interviewing. I had to drive down to not San Diego, but La Jolla, I think. Yeah. And I was going to interview DARRELL Hammond, who is, you know, he was a comedian on Saturday Night Live who is famous for his impressions, and I really had loved him as a performer. So I was excited to meet. He was doing a one-man show at La Jolla Playhouse based on an autobiography, a memoir about abuse by his mother. So it was kind of a dark topic. And I did a lot of background research. I read the book, and I listened to like several Howard Stern interviews with him. And I did a lot of, I wrote these questions that I thought were incredibly profound and probably were incredibly pretentious. Yes, I mean, definitely they were in retrospect. But I drove all the way down. I had like one coffee, I think, and I was really excited to meet him. And I could just tell the second I met him that he did not like me and wanted me to go away and was just tired and didn't want to be talking to me. And for some reason, we had to be seated on the stage. I don't know why they would seat me on the stage with him on the set for his show. Then his publicist and some other people were sitting in the front row of the audience watching me.
As though it were a performance.
And we were sitting on these 2 chairs in the stage, and the lights were like, they were big spotlights shining down on me. And, I don't know if this is true of all theater critics or people who work, behind the scenes, but I'm definitely not somebody who likes to be on stage. I love the theater so much, and I would love to be able to do it, but I just freeze up. I have terrible stage fright and terrible social anxiety, and I don't want to be looked at by anybody, certainly not publicists. And so I had this long list of questions, and my questions were very verbose. And I remember I asked like 8 of them in a span of about 30 seconds. And he was like, he just said no. to every question. I would like, do you think this? And they would long, and he would just go, mm-mm, and he would take a big gulp of like some large energy drink that he had to drink to sustain him during this tedious experience. And so then I was almost done with the questions. Like I thought I'd written, but it was like maybe 1 minute into the interview and I was almost done. We had an hour. So that was what was scheduled.
And a nightmare, just a nightmare.
And like the remaining questions were like the really lame ones, like, you know, where did you grow? Like the things that I put in there just in case I ran out of questions, which I didn't think was going to happen, which is my advice, by the way. Always, if you're going to write your questions, if you're not the kind of person who can just have a conversation, as I'm not, then you should write like 10 million questions because you're going to run out no matter what happens, or they'll answer all the questions in the first answer.
No. That's a quick answer.
Yeah, no. And I was like, well, what about, and I was losing, you know, and so I started to feel really weird. I started to feel very dizzy. And like I was having a panic attack, and even he was like, are you all right? And I said, I think maybe the lights, maybe I should go. He said, yeah, let's go outside. So we stood up and we were walking across the stage toward the door. And all of a sudden, like 5 seconds later, I woke up and I was looking at his,
God,
black round-toed shoes, and I was like, why am I looking at this man? Like, it took me a long time. He said, are you okay? What's wrong with you? Should we take you to the hospital? And I said, no, I'm fine. I remember the publicist said, I won't tell your editor. I was like, okay. I mean, you can. It's not going to change what happened. But we went outside to the back, and the publicist fell away. I guess they didn't want to humiliate me anymore. And then I was able to finish the interview. He warmed up a little. I guess he was like, look what this poor creature's going through. He wasn't. And I did get, you know, a piece that ran in the Times, and it didn't give any indication of what I endured. But I guess, yeah, that's my lesson. Is if somebody's being really hostile to you, just pass out.
That's helpful to all the up-and-coming journalists.
Just fall on your face.
Words to the wise. Words to the wise.
At their feet, and then you can carry
But I think
on.
there is something to be said for getting into another environment. I once had a similar thing with Tony Kushner. He was doing Homebody Kabul at the time, and it had already been in LA, and he'd emailed me and said he's working on rewrites. So I think the first question was, well, how are the rewrites going? And then he got really, really hostile.
Oh.
Like I was somehow implying that the show wasn't ready, that it wasn't very good in Los Angeles. It had already played at the taper.
Oh.
And he started to get really snarky. And I have to explain, like, no, actually, you had written me that you were doing rewrites. I was going off, and he still, and then I stood up. It was just an awful, it was like it wasn't on stage, it was in the dressing room and so I stood up, and all we had was coffees, and suddenly I knocked up, and the coffee on a styrofoam cup spilled and went all over him across the table.
He deserved it.
Yeah. And I thought, okay, well, this is over. I might as well check my return flight. You know, this is not going. And then he asked me, how are you doing? And I said, I think, not as well as you are, I think was my response. And then I proposed, I was like, what do we got to lose? I said, look, this is crazy. This is just a horrible environment. Let's just go down the street and get a cup of coffee or something.
Yeah.
And he was totally open to that. And the whole dynamic changed. So the space can really be, I mean, and he was completely gracious. And so sometimes it is just the room, or the oppressiveness of the room. And it sounds like you were in that kind of thing. Now, bringing this up to date a little bit, you were the president of, as you mentioned, of the LA Drama Critics, but you are not anymore. However, so what is going on with the circle, and how are they dealing with? Yeah,
well, not much. I mean, in 2009, 2019, we had our big 50th anniversary celebration. The circle was founded in 1969, which is the year of my birth. So I am co-terminus with the Drama Critics Circle. So we had this amazing, gorgeous party, award ceremony at the Pasadena Playhouse. And that was so fun. And, you know, it was a lot of people reminisced about when they were first in the circle. And it was a long evening, but it was wonderful. And then last year, when time came for the awards ceremony, for us to plan the next awards ceremony, which is always a little bit tricky because we're a bunch of critics, we're not producers.
Right.
And so a lot of us are not super great at producing. We prefer to criticize other people's productions, you know, which is not, but we really, I mean, there's always one person who says, let's just not even have an award show. Let's just mail out the plaques every year. Yeah. And the rest of us say, but that, you know, the community, that's so fun to see the community there cheering each other on and to see people who we know are really talented, you know, finally get some recognition. So it means a lot to us, you know, that's part of the reason we're in this. I mean, that basically is the reason we're in the Drama Critics Circle. I mean, we could get free tickets. I mean, that is a perk to get to go to any show you want to in LA, but a lot of reviewers have that anyway. If, you know, they're from their, if they're reviewing, they get to go see it for free. So for me, after seeing my first Drama Critics Circle show when the recipients of the awards were so happy, and I suddenly realized how valuable that is to feel like they're, you know, for them to feel like they've been acknowledged and seen for hard work they've put in. So we always say, no, we're going to do the show, even though it taxes us and it, you know, so, but then the pandemic hit.
Right. That's the question.
So that we couldn't do a show. And so we did have, you know, our usual voting ceremony, and we, you know, developed our winners, but then we just finally ended up, we just sent out a press release saying who had won in the categories. And then a few months later, I sent out some certificates that I printed up, you know, to the winners. And it was depressing, kind of. I mean, it was nice for them to get something, but it wasn't the same thing, you know, seeing them in their nice outfits. And
is there any kind of discussion about whether or not Zoom productions are eligible, or have you gone there? Or is there a prevailing sentiment on let's just do a pause and wait till live performance returns, or let's just credit the work what's going on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We did wrestle with that because, you know, nobody knew at first how long this was going to last. We thought maybe it might be a month or two, you know, we thought it was going to be a little blip, but then as things progressed, we started to realize we don't have any productions to evaluate. We don't have any, you know, we have a list we send around internally showing what plays people have seen and what they recommend to each other. So we need to get a quorum of people having seen them to nominate them for awards. So it's important, you know, the communicating among each other is important. Like, even if, you know, you've already seen a play that week, you maybe should see another play so they can be qualified for an award. But in this case, there was nothing happening except occasionally some of the stalwart publicists in LA who are really heroic right now. Like Lucy Pollock is such a hero. She keeps pitching all these productions, online productions. There was a series of radio plays that Antius playwrights wrote, and there was like a Zoom thing at the Kirk Douglas, or sponsored by the Kirk Douglas. And then there was some one-man shows that are online that have been taped and recorded. And so, you know, we put it to the group, you know, should we evaluate these online shows and which ones? I mean, since we are a local LA Drama Critics Circle, so we can't include ones that I guess we decided originate elsewhere. And to get a quorum to see, I mean, we agreed that we were going to try to at least maybe have some sort of acknowledgement of these works, which I think are valuable. I mean, I've seen some kind of moving things, but I think there's a consensus that we hope this is not going to be what it's like forever. I mean, we hope there's going to be a time when we can go back and see because I mean, what we all talk about all the time is that magical thing that happens in live theater. You know, that
Yeah, right. Of course. Otherwise, kind of, what's the point? Is there a contingent, even without naming names? Is there a point of view within the circle that says, no, I am not watching Zoom productions. I'm not reviewing them. Period.
Yes. There was some voices who said, if you guys want to do this, go for it. But I'm not gonna. I don't want to see an online play. People have said, I'm set in my ways. To me, it's not the same thing. There were a couple of people that I don't have any skills. I don't have any practice in evaluating this work. So it wouldn't be fair, you know, because it's a different format. It's a different feeling. And it's, you know, it's not what we were trained to do or trained ourselves to do. So I think the majority still is saying we should watch this. I mean, when I heard the Antaeus radio plays, I love all those actors, you know, so I was thrilled to hear their voices.
Well, the radio play is a genre that if you find the right material and the right, it has the verbal element. If it's language based, there is a long tradition of radio drama that doesn't feel compromised the way, say, it does on Zoom, where you can tell the actors are not in the same room and they're trying to use rather the artificial techniques of making them appear they're in the same room when we all know they're not, and you can tell they're not. And there's so much battering down the doors of plausibility on Zoom, whereas in a radio play that doesn't exist. So these are the issues of like a TV play, or people used to say, oh, a play on television. Oh no, but it turns out they can be superb.
Right, and a one-man show, or a one-woman show, it doesn't necessarily need. I mean, you can film it, right? You can film it and have a lot of set changes or any. I still feel like it misses. I still feel like it lacks something about the interaction with the audience.
Of course,
but you know, it's something that you can it's like a stand-up act. We watch comedy that has been filmed at live shows that have been filmed, and we watch that, and we're not there, but we can still find them enjoyable. And I did see that cool Zoom magic show, Elephant Room, Dust from the Stars. That was on Zoom, but they did these cool tricks where they pretended they were like passing things through each other's screens. So like one person would put something in and the other person would take it out. So it was cool. They were like using Zoom to play. They were playing around with the format, you know, and they had all the people watching with their cameras on. And there was one moment when they asked a woman to pick a card, but we couldn't hear because she was muted. And I was like, that's so 2020. I mean, you have.
I think that's the most common phrase of the year.
Yeah, you have to click unmute. I can't.
You're muted. You're muted. Yeah.
So I mean, it's going to be interesting. I hope. I mean, I'm still holding out hope that we can go back to normal life, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of changes and a lot of after effects from this strange period on how we interact with each other and what we expect. And like you were saying earlier, that you enjoy teaching on Zoom because you don't have to drive 3 hours a day to get back and forth. And in some ways, I mean, I don't necessarily want to have to drive down to the CTG to the Music Plaza on a Friday night, and I'd like to be home. So, how does theater, I guess, has to be really worth it to get us out of our house. Since we're so spoiled, we're just staying in here with our snacks. So it's going to have to be, I don't know.
Well, at least there's something to look forward to. The silver lining is it's the bed of nails theory. We've been lying on a bed of nails, and perhaps we'll be getting up soon. And, I hope
so. Yeah, I hope so for everybody. I mean, it's just so strange that what we used to do before the virus was just hang out together in large groups, breathing on each other and touching the same surfaces as each other. That was what we did for fun as a species. And now we can't do that ever. And I'm hoping, but it's going to be different. So,
Margaret Gray, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Next week, we're joined by actor Nicholas HORMANN. Nick has been on Broadway, off Broadway. He's performed in theaters, regional theaters around the country, and he's also a film and television actor. He's in his last stage outing. Nick was preparing to open Passion, a play called Passion by Stephen Sondheim at the theater at Boston Court when it was shut down by the pandemic. I'm sure he'll have something to say about what that means for an actor preparing to launch a show, and then a virus arrives.